In 1811, a black man named Charles Deslondes rose from the sugar plantations of Louisiana and lit a fuse that could have burned slavery to the ground. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't free. He wasn't supposed to matter. But what he did shook the very core of America. Charles didn't run. He didn't hide. He marched. With hundreds of other enslaved men, organized, armed, and unafraid. Their destination? New Orleans. Their mission? Take the city. End slavery. Start a new black republic. This would become the largest slave rebellion in U.S. history. Twice the size of Nat Turner's uprising. Yet somehow, you've never heard of it. This is the rebellion America buried. And it all began with a whisper. In the cane fields of the Deep South. The year is 1811. The place is the brutal sugar coast of Louisiana. Here, the fields are thick with cane, the heat clings to your lungs, and the whip never rests. Sugar was gold, and it was soaked in blood. And somewhere on the Andre plantation, 30 miles upriver from New Orleans, an enslaved man named Charles Deslondes is pretending to obey. But in his mind, he's building an army. Deslondes wasn't like the others. Born in Saint-Domingue, modern-day Haiti, he carried the fire of revolution in his bones. He had seen what black men were capable of. He had heard the name Toussaint Louverture. He had watched Haiti, the first black republic, rise out of slavery and war. And now, he wanted to bring that storm to America. Deslondes was what they called a driver, an enslaved man placed in charge of other enslaved people. He moved between plantations. He carried messages, tools, and secrets. One whisper at a time, he planted the idea, not of escape, but of conquest. He wasn't just organizing an uprising. He was building a revolution. On January 8, 1811, it began. The rebels struck fast. They killed the plantation owner, stole weapons, and torched the house. Then, in military formation, they marched down River Road, toward New Orleans. Over the next 48 hours, they burned plantations, freed others, grew in number, until they were 500 strong. This was not chaos. This was not rage. This was strategy. This was warfare. Their goal? New Orleans, a city full of arms, of ships, of symbols. If they could seize it, they could inspire uprisings across the South. Freedom wasn't just possible. It was within reach. And as they marched, people watched. Some trembled. Others wept. And many joined. Men who had never lifted their eyes before now carried machetes with pride. Elders sang freedom songs in African tongues. Children clung to hope like a torch passed hand to hand. But power does not fall quietly. The white planters panicked. The governor called the militia. The U.S. Army mobilized. Slave catchers, soldiers, vigilantes descended like a storm. And though the rebels were brave, they were outgunned, outnumbered, and surrounded. The dream came crashing down in blood. Deslondes was captured. They chopped off his hands, executed him, burned his body, then placed his head on a pike outside New Orleans. As a warning, over 100 rebels were killed. Some executed, some hunted down like animals. Dozens were decapitated. Their heads displayed along the road where they once marched. And then, silence. No memorials, No holidays, no page in your history book. Why? Because this wasn't just a rebellion. It was a mirror, a reminder that enslaved people weren't passive. They were tactical, strategic, courageous. Charles Deslondes didn't just fight for freedom. He nearly changed American history. And for that, they didn't just kill him. They erased him. But stories don't die that easy. The blood still stains River Road. The ashes of rebellion still linger in the cane fields. And the truth? It's resurfacing. The rebellion was crushed. But the fear, that didn't go away. It spread, like smoke from a burning plantation, like whispers in the halls of Congress. The uprising led by Charles Deslondes wasn't just a crack in the system. It was a warning shot. And for the white elite of the South, that shot hit dead center. Because it proved something they didn't want to believe, that the enslaved were thinking, watching, plotting. And one day, they would fight. After the rebellion was crushed, the retaliation was biblical. No mercy. Militias hunted the rebels through swamps and thickets, some barefoot, some wounded, some still gripping dull machetes. No trials, no juries, just execution. Bodies dumped in mass graves, heads severed and nailed to posts. All along the Mississippi River, like a trail of terror. One witness wrote, "The road from the plantation to New Orleans was lined with their heads on spikes." This wasn't justice. It was a message, a performance of power, and a warning to anyone, black or white, who even dared to dream of rebellion. But the truth? The rebellion didn't die with the rebels. It only went underground. Because something had been set in motion. Something no execution could stop. A realization that slavery was a lie held together by fear. And for the first time in America's Deep South, the enslaved saw that fear crack on the faces of their masters. That spark, it didn't fade. It passed from tongue to tongue, from field to field, until even the masters couldn't sleep without their guns by the door. But on paper, the system scrambled to hide it. The territorial government of Orleans, under pressure from Washington, made sure the rebellion was erased from the official narrative. In newspapers, it was called a riot. In ledgers, it was reduced to a Negro disturbance. No names, no details, no cause. Because if the world knew what really happened, that hundreds of enslaved black men nearly took a major American city, it would ignite the powder keg of rebellion across the South. Instead, they doubled down on control. In the months after the rebellion, new laws swept through Louisiana. No gathering of black people, enslaved or free, without white supervision. No weapons, no drums, no reading or writing, no freedom of movement. The fear was visible now, and it wore the mask of policy. But these laws weren't about order. They were about silencing memory, because memory is dangerous, and hope is contagious. And still, despite everything, they couldn't stop the rumors. Because across the river, deep in the shadows of the cypress trees, songs were still sung. In broken Creole, in Congo, in whispers that danced through the sugar cane, children heard stories of brave men who had stood up. Elders said their names in prayer, and every time a master turned his back, someone was teaching someone else how to make a blade, how to organize, how to resist. By 1812, the very next year, another spark lit a new fire. Escaped rebels, those who had survived, began filtering into maroon camps hidden in the bayous. Outlaws, survivors, runaways. They formed secret villages deep in the swamps, protected by the land and the spirits. These maroon societies, untraceable, ungovernable, kept the rebellion alive in exile. They trained. They passed down the story. They called Charles Deslondes a general, not a slave. And from these swamps, small raids began on plantations, silent, precise, vengeful. The rebellion never truly ended. It just changed shape. Back in New Orleans, white society tried to erase the scars. They rebuilt. They re-enslaved. They moved on. But the enslaved never forgot. And even as America expanded westward, even as the Cotton Empire grew, even as the textbooks were written, the blood on the river road never dried. Because when you bury a rebellion in silence, it grows roots, and one day it breaks through the surface again.